2 weeks ago, Judge Shabazz ruled that this plant has been in violation of the Clean Air Act for the last 5 years.
Well, there are a number of pollutants that are emitted from coal-fired power plants. They're one of the dirtiest pollution sources in the country. They're, in addition to the global warming pollution, which is huge from a coal-fired power plant, the Charter Street plant also emits from burning coal, also emits fine particles, nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, carbon monoxide, mercury, beryllium, and a handful of other hazardous metals into the air. The Clean Air Act says was intended to install modern pollution controls on all large sources of air pollution. The deal that was made in the 1970s when the Clean Air Act was passed was that there are a number of older plants that intended to be shut down in 5 to 10 years. And so the bargain was that no pollution controls would be required from those plants, but when they were replaced or when they were upgraded or modified, that's when the pollution controls would need to be put in place. And since then, what we've found is, for one reason or another, many of those plants were never replaced, as Congress was led to believe in the 1970s, and instead they were rebuilt piece by piece. And so now we're some 30 years later, and there's still no modern pollution controls on the vast majority of coal-fired plants around the country. In fact, some of the commentary about the Charter Street settlement, people noted that Charter Street didn't have modern pollution controls, but what a lot of people don't realize is that with the exception of one plant in Wisconsin that's getting modern pollution controls currently because of an enforcement case by the US EPA, there are no modern pollution controls on any of the existing coal-fired plants around the state. It means that all but one of the operating coal-fired power plants in the state doesn't have a scrubber, doesn't have modern bag houses to collect particle pollution, doesn't have mercury pollution controls, and doesn't have controls to reduce nitrogen oxides, pollution controls known as an SCR or SNCR technology.
Today marks a great day for folks in Madison and folks across the state of Wisconsin in terms of air pollution from our coal-fired power plants. Today, the Sierra Club entered into a settlement with the University of Wisconsin and the State Department of Administration to clean up the coal plant that you see behind me. We've been in litigation with the University of Wisconsin for a little over a year now, and working with them for 3 years to try to find plans to clean up this old, outdated coal-fired power plant that has no modern pollution controls on it. Today we entered into a settlement that requires this plant to reduce the amount of coal that it burns 15% on January 1st. So we will see immediate reductions in the amount of coal that's burned on the isthmus and the amount of air pollution we have in our air. The next thing that the settlement does is requires the university to follow a timeline to bring us the solution. The university will be working in cooperation with the city, the county, the state of Wisconsin, and Madison Gas and Electric to look at much cleaner fueled, much more efficient ways to power the isthmus and provide heat for the university and state-owned office buildings. Finally, what this settlement will do is require the state of Wisconsin to review all of its coal-fired power plants. The state's got over a dozen coal-fired power plants across Wisconsin, all of them outdated, none of them with modern pollution controls. The state will review all of those plants and start finding plans to clean them up or retire them in exchange for cleaner sources of power.
The filings that were made in the case were essentially undisputed facts between the two parties. And so both parties, the state of Wisconsin and the Sierra Club, agreed to the facts, what occurred at the plant, when it occurred, how much it cost, the extent of the changes. The difference was Sierra Club contended that those changes violated the law, and the state contended that those violations did not violate the law. And the judge then looked at the uncontested facts, looked at the law, and agreed with the Sierra Club. And what this amounts to is it's one example among many in the entire state of Wisconsin at coal-fired power plants that those plants are required to apply modern pollution controls, and those requirements to install modern pollution controls occur when the plant is modified. And there are dozens and dozens of coal-fired plants around the state of Wisconsin that have gone through similar modifications and similarly are in violation of the Clean Air Act because they failed to get the necessary permits, and more importantly, they failed to install modern pollution controls when they did those modifications. The settlement that Sierra Club entered with the University of Wisconsin and the Wisconsin Department of Administration requires the Department of Administration to look at modifications they've done to their approximately 12 other coal-fired power plants to determine, together with Sierra Club and the Department of Natural Resources, whether those similar modifications also violated the Clean Air Act, to bring those plants into compliance. So the intent is to bring all of the state's coal-fired power plants into compliance with the Clean Air Act as part of this settlement. There are dozens of other plants operated by other industries and utilities around the state of Wisconsin that have gone through similar modifications and have not yet complied with the Clean Air Act. Sierra Club has a campaign to clean up those plants through a series of measures between commenting to the Department of Natural Resources and through litigation as a last resort when those plants don't come into compliance with the law. The implications of this case do stretch beyond Wisconsin. There are many, many similar situations at coal-fired plants, especially coal-fired power plants. And these types of violations have been found by the Environmental Protection Agency, who's brought lawsuits in several other cases. And those cases involve millions of dollars worth of changes at large coal-fired power plants. And what the judge found in this case is that even smaller, comparatively smaller projects at a coal-fired power plant run by the state violated the law, which should mean that those millions of dollars worth of changes at coal-fired power plants at utilities around the country are well outside of what the law allows. And I would add that Sierra Club's volunteers spent a lot of time and effort and energy in helping with this case and many others both in Wisconsin and around the country. And without those volunteers and that support, these kind of cases wouldn't be possible.